Under the third tab.
Third tab?
Here, Jeff, this packet here that starts with conservation has the Board of Health.
Oh, very good.
Was that in the note or
She
something?
handed them out.
Oh, I didn't get that. No.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to call to order the day today is January 13th, 2020, Sherborn Select Board meeting. If I could have the town administrator read the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, we'll amend or approve the agenda, and then a period of public comment. And then with the meeting calendar, next meeting dates are January 16th, February 1st, with a budget meeting with advisory and capital budget. Then review and finalize comment letter to Mass Housing, Apple Hill Estates at 31 Hunting Lane, and Pine Residences at 41 North Main Street, with a letter due to Mass Housing on January 17, 2020. Then adjourn to executive session, will not return to open session. And the exemption is MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, subsection 3, to discuss strategy with respect to threatened potential litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of the town, and the chair so declares. Library.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Okay, so under the calendar, do we need to vote on the next meeting dates? I think we've already voted on those, right, David?
Yeah.
That was just for informational purposes? Okay.
Yeah.
So the main reason we're having the meeting tonight is to go through our letter to Mass Housing, which we've had drafts in section 1, I think is the most recent draft. Is that correct, David? Mm-hmm. From our board, we also got a red line copy from a group of the neighbors. John, I think Craig had sent us the red line copy that you guys worked on, or your attorney, so we have that here as well. I think Diane isn't up here yet, but I think she has clean copies of that as well, if anybody up here wants to see the clean copy from them. But I think we should probably just run through our letter that David has in here and discuss it piece by piece.
Well, if I could, I actually prefer the letter from the abutters because it has some really nice arguments that are not made in our letter, particularly on the opening sections here about being eligible, the area.
What section are you in, Paul?
Just a second, Paul. Diane, can you get us the clean copies of the letter from the abutters? You had that, you said you had copies of that, right?
It's not in a,
It's this one, isn't it? Or did you pass out?
You said you had them just a few minutes ago when you asked me if we wanted them.
I thought they did a nice job of organizing things, but they introduced some new arguments.
here.
The non-red line version, I think is what he means by
This is the
clean.
red line version.
This is what I have.
They had a
This,
clean version.
I gave them that, and I have this.
Yes, that's the
That's
one.
what you want?
Yep.
Particularly on page 2.
Okay.
Are you in the red line version, page 2, Paul? The
Yeah,
Blue line,
I'm
I
using
guess
the
you
red
call it.
line version. But page 2, it's got 40B safe harbors,
Thank you.
and it's got the statutory safe harbor, and then it's got the regulatory safe harbor. Those are arguments that are really not made before. And I think they're good arguments. So if I could, just to summarize them, maybe there's somebody here from the abutters who wants to speak on this, but failing that. The points that leaped out to me was the fact that any project more than 10 acres has got a statutory problem under 40B. And that argument's made at the top of page 2. And then there's this regulatory safe harbor. So they advance two arguments that aren't made in our letter from before. So they're worth making, and maybe the abutters can.
John, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. John Garrison, 33 Hunting Lane. I did not write this part, and I don't pretend to be an authority, but I believe, Paul, the first paragraph, if I'm reading it correctly, the safe harbor is if the proposed development would exceed the greater of 0.33% or 10 acres. So in this case, it would have to exceed the 0.3% of the total, which is what's covered in the second paragraph. They're trying to do the math.
But the important part is that what's proposed in this 40B development exceeds the statutory safe harbor criteria according to the calculations made,
We believe, yeah.
and therefore it is not appropriate to be approved. That's essentially the argument in that paragraph.
Yes.
Yeah, Paul, the other piece that I really like is, as we discussed at our last meeting, the way this is structured, the Roman numeral 2, and Eric, I think this is one of the points you kept making, lays out very specifically the mass housing eligibility criteria and addresses each of them. So I think it's just, a lot of the arguments are the same through here, but I think it's just structured better. So I agree with Paul. I'd like to work off of this draft.
I definitely like the residential's draft. My only concern is what our time frame is here, because I feel it'd be irresponsible just to approve it without some fact checking. Like, I'm not familiar with this math on safe harbor, and we have a housing plan. I want to make sure it's consistent with other things we've said. You know, so I just want to make sure I'm fact checking. I would tone some of it down with some parts that sound a little biased. The massive and tall apartment buildings, I mean, they are, but I think we just have to be careful in not sounding NIMBY-like, and we have to be very cautious on sounding as factual as possible on that. So I just want to kind of like comb through in that sense there. Do we have to approve this tonight?
No, I think we'll do final approval on Thursday
Okay,
night,
very
because
good.
it has to be sent on Friday. Tonight, we're going to really work through, and I want to get to a point where we know exactly what we're going to have Thursday night to approve.
Okay.
So I see two big edits needed to the letter. The first is that this letter, like our letter, doesn't contain the summary of the Conservation Commission's new letter. So we received a new letter, I think like Friday or something like that, from the Conservation Commission. It was an excellent letter. It raised points about the fact that the well that's going to feed all of this is located in the buffer zone, and the results were not as good as should be, and then they had to do fracking to get the wells to work. Excellent argument that this isn't a good location for it. None of that is in this draft letter.
Right, because they haven't had a
it
chance to see it, exactly.
came- Yeah, later,
Same for the Board of Health isn't in here either.
right. And
That's
the
right, those
second
need to
part
be
is-
summarized and
Which is
added.
quite good also.
Yep.
So those two pieces, the Concom piece and the Board of Health, water and sewer are essential to the approval or disapproval of a 40B project. And both letters have a lot of facts in there that are very useful information. As I say, the Concom had its very useful stuff, and the Board of Health had a number of very useful pieces too, including not just the water piece, but also the fact that the septic system was like up a hill, on ledge, had to be blasted, you had to get it pumped up there, all these wonderful quotes that are
Not to
just
mention,
waiting.
that's right, the ledge disruption though too is key, because that can contaminate the water also.
Well, all those points need to be summarized and put into this letter. But I think if you do those two things, and the edits proposed by Eric, we're done.
Yeah, and I want to echo one of the things that Eric said, which is, I want to make sure this is factually
check, yeah.
as precise as possible.
Consistent with other statements we've made.
Yeah, there was a statement in the Concom letter that is actually contradicted in the Concom letter itself, which it says that the town has a total dependence on wells, and that's just not accurate. The apartment building out near Sunshine Dairy has Framingham Town Water. There are some houses back behind the prison that have Framingham Town Water. There's the house, Jeff, that you mentioned.
On Speen Street.
On Speen Street that has town water.
From
And-
Natick.
And in fact, the Concom letter talks about that. The master plan describes it as near total dependence.
Yeah.
It's accurate to say that Sherborn does not have any public water supply. It is not accurate. There's a difference between total dependence and near total. So I just want to get the facts.
Right, so Neil, if you
Right.
could revise your letter to do that, I think that would be
Yeah, I don't want to
helpful.
be guilty of what we saw where it's alleged that we had no housing production plan. It was alleged that we had no town master plan.
Yeah.
Let's get the facts right.
Yep.
It should be as fairly simple as adding the word near.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. It's
Yeah.
not that
But
far
I-
off, but it's,
Yeah, yeah.
let's be as
But I would-
accurate as we
But
can.
like Eric, I want to be able to go through this and correct things that I know are not
Absolutely,
completely accurate.
absolutely.
So, before we get to like individual sections, do you envision, like, we've started this with the same format that the red line letter has of the components. Do we want to have an executive summary for ours also that takes, because we go through and sort of refute things in each one of the eligibility, siting, design, but we want to say up front, we have,
I think we do, their version of the letter has that, I think it has a nice little summary on the first page that gives the sections, and it says this, so it's kind of a good reference point as to where in the letter we're going to be discussing things. I like that, and I think we state up front that we're unanimously opposed to the project. I think that's important, but then I think we get into the most important piece, as Eric has said, is the mass housing eligibility criteria, and we just run through those points.
okay.
Like I said, that section up front gives a nice table of contents. So if there's someone there that's gonna review those eligibility requirements, they can go right to them.
Yep. Neil, go ahead. Yeah, if you could, just because it's on television, so they can hear you.
Just a couple of quick things.
Identify yourself.
Sorry, Neil Kessler, 43 Page Farm Road, Sherborn Conservation Commission Chair. So just in terms of the safe harbor stuff, we definitely, I think this letter from the abutters kind of raises the question of whether we are or aren't, but we just should be careful in whatever we state in the letter that we're accurate. We are not in safe harbor regulatorily because we haven't, even though we have projects that have sort of been talked about and proposed, it doesn't enter into the calculation until the town receives an application, not even the state, but the town. So once the approval letter comes through from the state and the application comes into the town, then those go into the pipeline. But until their comprehensive permit is issued, you're still not at safe harbor. And safe harbor is, I think it's 2% and then it gives you a 2-year sort of reprieve where the ZBA can reject any other project. So I don't think currently we're in safe harbor, although obviously we do have a housing production plan. But we haven't even gotten it certified because we've never hit any of the safe harbor numbers for us to be able to go back and get it certified. So just as you're going through that kind of stuff, I think it's important to just be correct about it, just like we were talking
Absolutely,
about.
that's what
Near
Eric-
total versus total, like all that stuff should be buttoned up.
Yeah,
And
where
then
was that section? We're
it was
specifically,
It's
it was
right
what
here in
Paul
the
was
safe
referring
harbor.
to in the abutters.
the regulatory safe harbor?
Exactly.
Thanks.
And then the other thing, I haven't seen, obviously, your draft, but it was something I raised at the last meeting, was does your letter talk about sort of the fit with the topology and all of that kind of stuff in terms of it being kind of out of keeping with the surrounding neighborhoods and the surrounding town? Because this is the point I brought up the last time, that one of the things that killed the original Medfield Meadows project was the fact that it was completely out of keeping with the neighboring residences and that kind of stuff. And I think this project is similar in that sense, is that it's
Second
sort of-
page.
Citing.
Under
Is in
the
there.
design and citing, in design, we also,
A large 60-unit apartment block is completely out of scale with the rest of the town center and inappropriate for its location, blah, blah, blah.
and it also says, in design, the conceptual designs of both proposed projects are highly inappropriate considering the topography and environmental resources of the respective sites. So,
And that'll dovetail nicely with our
So
comments.
if I could, at this point,
Yep.
I was handed a architectural renderings of what the 60-unit apartment complex was going to be, and I'm wondering if we could add that as an exhibit. Because when you look
Thank
at
you.
this, you know, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at this, the fact that it's out of keeping with the community leaps.
I'd be cautious on.
I would be because it's not from the builder. That will wake you up. You know, it's the abutters who did this. I'm a little hesitant to use it because they'll say, well, that's not our exact design or something like that.
It tells a good story. It reminds me of the one when you took the Sherborn in and you popped it over the other things. I like that.
I mean, I think it's,
Yeah, go ahead.
again, John Garrison, 33 Hunting Lane. This is something that we hired an architect to produce based off the developer's measured drawings. So we believe it's an accurate perspective rendering. But once again, I understand
I just
the
probably wouldn't
reservation
wanna
of
use it
producing
because-
something that the developer has not.
Right, they have their design that they've submitted, so that's what we have to go on, I think.
And if I could just, and then
Yeah.
I'll shut up, is, you know, in terms of the way we tried to organize our letters, certainly the safe harbor were two new arguments that we were trying to bring to the attention of the board. And then for the eligibility criteria, we tried as closely as we could to just tick the 7 bullet points that's in the handbook, and even specifically, as you said, under design, where it talks about topography, environment, does it integrate with existing development patterns, use their verbiage as much as we could.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about this at the last meeting, and this is a regulatory body. They have actually fairly detailed descriptions of the eligibility, so utilize it.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
So if I could, just to go back over the point that George was making, I think if you included this with caveats, you would force the response from the developer to address better what their project is going to look like. So there's an advantage to put this in. And the fact that an architect spent some time and money doing this, as long as we say that's where it comes from, what's wrong with including it?
I don't know, does it exude, not in my backyard, kind of thinking that, you know, other towns have developments that probably look just like that, so they might,
We have to, yeah, sorry.
you know, no, go ahead.
There's a description in our letter about downtown Sherborn, the fact that this is going to tower over anything else that's nearby. And if the developer says, no, that's not my design, then here's the opportunity for them to say, here's what my design is, which would then allow us to file something that says, wait a second, even their response is not acceptable for the following reasons. As far as I know, they never submitted these kind of visualizations as to what that building was going to look like.
No, the only thing we have are, I mean, what you included in here, this is what we have from their plans that was submitted to Mass Housing. That's the only renderings that they submitted. The only other part of using this, Paul, I mean, one thing they don't have on here that I would have to look at the developer's plan again, is like I think whether they were keeping trees along North Main Street or not. And this has no trees there, and I know you had said when you first said the proposal that the trees are staying along North Main, so that's a little bit, that's why I would be a little careful about using. Go ahead, John.
If I could again.
Yep.
and Sorry to keep jumping up and down. I just got these today, and the guy who was producing them says, I still need to add in some of the vegetation on the road, but I wanted to get these to you for now.
Okay.
But
I sort of
that could easily be produced by Thursday.
I sort of share Eric's view that I think in most towns, this 3-story building, it started looking a little NIMBY-ish. The four levels for Sherborn certainly is much taller. That's much more dominating. But I just worry about, you know, this is a state agency looking at affordable housing in every town in the Commonwealth. I'm not sure that a 3-story apartment building would be considered so outrageous by them, so I worry about the NIMBY reaction.
And that's kind of what I was going to say. So I'm going to speculate that more than less of the comments they get from other communities might not fully support some of the 40B applications that they get. So they might read a lot of negative. We have to be as unbiased and factual as possible. That's why I focus on fact-checking, even not softening, but taking out language that may appear that, make it appear that, we are serious about affordable housing, we've been improving things all along, and this one's just not a good fit and not consistent with your applications, versus, you start throwing in images that an opposer, made, even if did it through a licensed architect, they still made it. And it's just, I think we just got to be a little bit, as factual as possible, and that makes the most powerful argument to them, because I bet you they hear, we don't like this all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You just have to be, just, and this is powerful, even if you do those things, the fact checking, of course, you have to, and then, soften some, or take back language that may sound biased. It's a pretty powerful argument here, and I think, I don't want to ruin that with something that,
Right.
might make it appear biased, that's all.
I agree. One thing that came up today, I just want to bring it up with the board. I spoke with, Roy McDowell called me from Baystone Development, who is signing a purchase and sale agreement with, Pulte to move forward with the apartments on Coolidge Street that we've talked about in the past. So they're hoping to be moving forward quickly on that. I don't know if that help, when we talk about our working with developers towards meeting our criteria for affordable housing, if there's any mention, he said we could mention his name publicly because they're moving forward with it. I don't know if we should incorporate anything like that
I'm
in
trying
or
to remember,
not.
that gets us very near 10%, but I don't
Correct.
think it quite gets us there.
Right.
I think it's just under 10% if I remember the SHI numbers.
But there's a reference in here to going to town meeting and getting some changes made to get us to 10%. I just don't, it's not clear to me why we're going to town meeting. Why can't the planning board approve an increase of a few units for the rental piece, which is
I don't think, first of all, I don't think we need to be at 10%. We just have to show that we're on our plan
Right. That's true.
to prevent a 40B. So it doesn't matter, the 40% doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters in the long term, but in 1 year's time frame, we'll be
Right.
well on our plan to getting to 10%.
No, that's a great point.
So we
The
don't need
point
to,
is not that we're at the 10% SHI.
Is that we're getting
Yeah.
into our safe harbor,
Yeah.
under
Yeah.
our housing development plan. Marion, do you want to come up?
Yeah, I would just like to mention that the planning board letter included numbers that took into account the Coolidge Street plans that I think at the time we didn't know that there was a developer in hand, but we wrote it such that, things were moving forward. And regardless of the number that they finally end up with in the rental units on Coolidge Street, I think our little paragraph on the numbers that we've been working with is important to include, because it also emphasizes that we're trying hard.
Right. Well, and I think my point is that, we're not just saying it's moving forward, that today I got confirmation that it is moving forward.
Right.
So-
So that paragraph that, from the planning board letter could be revised. It's right up in the very front of the planning board
Okay.
report, because we thought it was so important.
Great, thank you.
and it's also in our section H of this letter.
Okay.
The very bottom of the first paragraph of section H. We currently have 40B projects under construction, which alone add 92 units to our housing stock. And in 2017, it has Chuck's favorite point about the 86%.
What was that number?
86 point something, right?
Hold on, I just need to catch up here.
That's section H in our letter. The very
I
end.
read it in our letter, I'm finding it in their letter.
I think
Oh.
it's out of there.
It's right above the summaries of the various boards, right above Section B, Conservation Commission. That paragraph is unchanged.
It may not be in their letter. I don't
In the red line, it's on page 4, 6, page 8 of the red line.
I'm looking at the non.
The paragraph right above B, Conservation Commission.
Yeah, that's where it is.
Yep.
while you're mentioning things that happened today, I got a copy of a letter from the developer or the developer's representative. I've got one letter, but I hear that there's two letters. And I don't think that should change our letter, but I think those letters should go to town council to evaluate so that we can figure out if it makes any changes with regard to the 61B issue.
Did you want to say something? I'm sorry, did you? Yeah, if you could, please.
Please come in at 5:45 tonight.
Just identify yourself so everybody knows who you are.
Lynn Sweet, LDS Consulting Group from Newton, Massachusetts. I'm working with the applicant. We did send a letter today with regard to the Hunting Lane home ownership development, taking one of the parcels out of the development. It's an 8-acre parcel that is currently covered by the Chapter 61B agricultural restriction. We understand that there's actually no development going on the surface of that site. There may be a water line going under it. Therefore, Mr. Lubarsky is going to continue to own the property. And if there is a water line that goes underneath it, the agricultural lien will remain in place. So that parcel is being withdrawn from the ownership application. We did provide a letter today. There's a couple of tweaks that we need to make to the application, which we will be making tomorrow. With regard to the rental project, we are looking to add actually some more land into that parcel, and that would, the purpose for that is really just to allow more room, more flexibility, should there be a need to do any kind of reconfiguration or discussions in the future about the rental system. So those two changes are being made this week. In our discussion with Mass Housing today, if the town feels that it wants a few more days to digest that, the development team is not going to object to that.
Thank you.
Well, I'm thinking that we should finalize this letter, file this letter on time, and then get town council's opinion about the legal arguments being made. In other words, if running a water main under the parcel and looking at the whole thing, I think there may be more than water mains. There may be a sewer lane too, but if town council looks at it and comes back and has an argument to be made, then I think we should send a second letter saying this revised project also doesn't meet our approval for the reasons stated in the original letter, plus see town council's.
We should have town council absolutely review
Well,
these letters as
I
soon
think
as
we need
can.
to add a request to be able to respond. I mean, this letter is dated today, January 13th, and
I think the other one that you sent earlier was, that Diane sent us was dated today as well, right?
I forwarded that
yeah,
to the board.
that's what I'm looking at.
I definitely agree with, there's enough complexities with this, and if it tweaks like one of the many comments here, then it does that. Like, the other one I think indicated an easement. Does an easement that's a title right to property, does that affect 61? I don't know. I don't want our council to tell us that. The other thing is, you can answer, has the applicant officially withdrawn from the 61B withdrawal? Have they withdrawn their withdrawal?
Yeah, because that's a notice to the town, not
Yeah.
Mass Housing.
So, I mean,
So my role on this project is simply related to the project eligibility and to Mass Housing. My understanding is that the town rejected the notice on the 61B. This is related to notifying Mass Housing and the town that the parcel is not needed for the project going forward, and that having an easement is going to suffice. From a development perspective, I would expect that there would be a letter coming from the attorney's office that would elaborate on it with relative to the 61B. So, it's absolutely your choice whether or not you want more time now, or you want to get a letter in and then reserve a right to respond on this down the lane, down the road. Both of them will be acceptable, and we will not object to them.
Okay, thank you. I think, I agree with Paul, though. I think regardless of what they're proposing in those, I think we're well down the road on having a good letter of why we oppose the 40B projects, and then we can supplement after.
Yeah, I don't want to miss the deadline.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, I feel like it's like we're on the 3rd yard line.
Yep.
We're ready to drive in for a touchdown, and here we're being told, wait a second, we're changing the plays, it's a 20-yard penalty, move back, reset, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's what,
So I think,
that's what the Texans thought yesterday,
Single
too.
20 roughing the passer.
so I think with the letter, just a question here, David, for structure on this. Like with the letter that the abutters sent, we want to fact check the safe harbor things, as Neil pointed out, and what was that, I'm sorry?
Do you want me to talk to the safe harbor for a second? Would that be helpful?
If you'd like to make a comment on it, go ahead.
I just have to agree with the gentleman who spoke that the safe harbor doesn't really come into play until you're in front of the zoning board of appeals. That you can look at the Mass Housing, DHCD website and see that the town is not a certified community. All of that is public information. So I know that you're feeling pressed for time, and hopefully there will be time down the road to deal with safe harbor issues if a project eligibility is provided, but Mass Housing doesn't look at safe harbor issues.
Okay, thank you.
I don't want to comment on that because the actual guidance document for the 40B stated that if the town is showing intent, and I think that language is very, very important in there. I wish I had it in front of me, but it's very important in there, which is why, to one edit of I'm looking at the abutters letter, and I'm looking at our original letter, section H.
Yes.
Additional comments and concerns for the town department and talk to the planning board. It doesn't feel as strong in the abutters letters. I like what was written, but maybe I missed it.
Yeah, I think, no, I agree with what you said.
Because it goes through all the approvals that we've done over the years, and talks about the largest town meeting in the past 20 years, we voted for 86%, and I'm not, yeah, it does say that here.
Yeah,
I want to make sure that that's, to me, because that was a specific thing called out in the guidance document that actually says this could be strong, and I don't want it to be like on page 8, you know what I mean? And it's just a subsection under planning board. Somehow it feels like it should be more
Right.
prominent than that.
I think at a general level, though, we should just go with our version and then take pieces from the abutters version that we think we're missing, maybe.
I think it's hard about that, it's just time-wise, you know what I mean? It's
Well, but there's,
kind of like pick one and tweak it or the other, you know what I mean?
well, that's what I'm saying, pick
Well, I
ours.
think the rest of us had kind of, I don't know, I think we like the abutters letter, and maybe we put some of our pieces back in.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of little changes that the butters have made that makes it more powerful.
I know, but I think it doesn't include some things that are in our letters, why
I think that's part of what the edit process that we've been describing, that Chuck has talked about and Eric has talked about. I'm fine with adding stuff back in, but again, what I see as the big omission is the Concom piece and the Board of Health. Those, to me, are huge. Once you get those in, you fact check it, you add in
I
stuff
think
from
add some of
the
that
earlier letter.
section H back in, like you said, Eric.
So.
It's just better organized, I think.
I thought section H was
Maybe
put
it's
in
close.
with almost no changes.
The version I read before went down about Woodhaven and farms. I have to see more cleanly side by side, 'cause there was a version I read that talked about a history of Woodhaven, including Leland Farms and so on like that in town.
Yeah, that language is from our letter and it's unchanged. It's the next to last paragraph, looking at the red line version, page 8.
Look at I'm looking at the clean version of the abutters, just because the red line,
Okay,
Excuse me a
let
little bit.
me grab that and.
Yeah, I found the clean version easier to read as well.
once it's all red, I just kind of ignore it. And
I guess that one paragraph looks the same.
yeah.
What page is it?
It's, well, the pages differ in the two documents, but section H.
In
the-
our letter, but
What's
they
there?
don't have a section H, and
Yeah,
In their
Yeah,
letter,
it's
it's under
H, it's red lined out.
item 3A.
3A, right.
Yeah, Roman numeral 3,
there it is,
capital A. It's under planning board.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's good enough.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Well, what impresses me is that the abutters have hired counsel, they've hired architects, they are really committed to doing this, and that we should take advantage of it. Sorry to be so mercenary about it, but if they're willing to make this effort and to provide all of this information, why not?
Like, as long as, like Eric has said numerous times, like, as long as we're fact-checking everything and making sure that everything.
Inconsistent with previous statements.
Neil, go ahead.
Neil Kessler, 43 Page Farm Road. I just heard that when you were talking about your draft earlier about referencing the town meeting we had to approve the EA project, I think you should be careful about how you phrase it, only because you did not approve any 40B housing in that project. You approved the EA project, which is a local project, with the hope that the developer, if given the approval of the EA, would also build the 88 units at 84 Coolidge Street. There was no sort of legal component that compelled him to do it. He promised he would do his best to do it. As we know now, he didn't, and sort of has walked away from both projects. But if we're going to talk about progress toward affordable housing, the things that are going to matter to the state agency are things that are actually 40B projects, things that are realistically in the pipeline. I think you can make the connection because the real reason that the town got so strongly behind it was because of the promise of the 88-unit project. Like, in the town's mind, I think those two went hand in hand. So I think you can point to it as an instance where the town is really striving to do all it can for affordable housing, but just be careful not to call it a vote on affordable housing, because it wasn't. Okay?
Well, actually, I think the language does that very carefully. The language in the letter now is, in 2017, with the largest town meeting attendance in the past 20 years, the town voted 86% in favor of enabling 2 more housing projects with the realistic goal of achieving 10% affordable housing. It doesn't talk about them as 40B projects.
What were the 2 projects that were approved?
I'm sorry?
What were the 2 projects approved?
We've attached the town meeting vote.
It was 104 Coolidge was the
The other
special
was
permit, and I don't think,
Marion knows.
The key word, we spent half an hour on this in planning board, the wording, and you're absolutely right, we have to be very careful about what we say there. So we did spend a lot of time, and we ended up with, the town voted, whatever percentage, 86%, biggest town, whatever, to enable, not to approve, but to enable.
Right. Right.
And so the approval of the EA was made to also enable the 40B. So I think that sort of gets around, although I understand it could be misread.
just be careful.
Right.
Because it could be taken as you voted on 2 projects, we voted on 1, with the idea that it would enable in a very loose sense the other. But just be careful to make the differentiation, just so we're not saying anything we don't need.
Yeah, I guess we could add a couple words there. I just want to mention one other thing about 40B and the housing production plan. The consultant rightfully said that we don't have a certified housing production plan, but we do have an approved housing production plan, which is something. And in the original developer letter, we did get it approved by the state. There are 2 steps to the housing production plan. You get it approved, and then when you have the housing, it's certified. So we can say that we have it approved, and we can emphasize that because not all towns do. And very few towns have certified plans.
And to iterate what George had previously said, we actually got contacted by someone who has purchased that section, and I can tell you that person has a long history of actually successful developments in the Metro West area.
So it's not just just to clarify what you said, it is moving forward. It's not something that's completely dead, so.
Yeah, I was talking more about the town meeting originally, that did 1, but with the eye to the other.
Thank you.
So we could maybe check with the language in the planning board's letter,
Yeah, just make sure that it's
It
because
says
it's
enable.
probably,
used the
That is the
same.
language I just
I think they
read.
copy and pasted.
oh, okay.
The language that I just read
Yeah,
is the
okay.
language that I think we should incorporate.
Yeah, okay, good.
The planning board's language.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was,
Enabling to
I
more
was
housing,
convinced
yep.
by
The word enabling is in there.
Yeah,
the planning board's representative that they spent a fair amount of time going over the words. They're duly elected to do this, and if they're okay with it, then I'm okay with what she said.
Marion Neuter, again, 25 Prospect Street. That said, we would be in favor of adding a couple more words in there to satisfy Neil's concern that enable may not be as clear as we would like it to be. And one could explain it in a few more words, but, you can see if you want to.
We're actually attaching the warrant from that town meeting, so the
Oh.
specific approvals language is going to be incorporated in the package.
Oh, that's fine then.
John?
Just quickly, John Garrison, once again. I know we're obsessing on a sentence, but in our section B of our letter that we basically took the planning boards, if you look at the middle of that second paragraph in December 2017, the way we phrased it was the large attendance, 86 of those present voted in favor of amending our zoning bylaws. I think that's a true statement to enable two significant senior and affordable projects on locations.
I'm fine with
Again,
it.
I
We're
don't
attaching the
know.
article. We have the whole thing in there. If you want, we could add something about we've been contacted by the developer, intent, whatever. I mean, at this point, I think it's very reasonable.
So could I have a suggestion that we have these remaining tasks and we kind of divide it up and see who's doing what and let's get it actually done? Are we going to have David do all of this, or
Well, at this point, I think it's taking the abutter's letter, fact-checking it,
who's going to do
making...
the fact-checking?
I think that needs to be done through town council, correct?
Yeah, some of it, certainly, like, some of that math they had, I just don't know it, you know
Town
what I mean? It's
council
someone-
and maybe Gino Carlucci?
Yeah.
That's not a bad idea.
I think Gino should, yeah, that's a good idea.
That is a good idea, because Gino has access to an awful lot of this information. I mean, I'm sure he's already vetted the numbers from your comment letter, the 92 units of 40B projects in
92
process.
units of residential, 92 residential units.
92 units that are in 3 40B projects.
Right. The 92 units adds to our denominator.
Right.
The point is the denominator there, not the numerator of affordable units.
Does it make sense to have Gino take a look at this?
Sure.
In particular, the first section that they added about the safe harbor, I'd like Gino to really focus on that. I think that's an important piece that we want to be
Right.
completely factual on.
Yes, but as Eric said, town council and
Right.
Gino.
Absolutely.
both. They add different,
I just jumped back to the microphone because I heard something that I thought was inaccurate, that the vote in 2017 enabled, or a zoning change enabled an affordable housing project. It did not. The zoning change enabled one EA project that had 10%, not 25%, but 10% affordable housing in it. And that's the only thing that it enabled in that year. So just to get that clear.
Right.
Well, it's the only thing it authorized.
Is that correct?
It's for a local project only, because the 40B doesn't, there's no local anything, it's state.
so again, I just want to raise the mechanical issue of who's going to
David's going to coordinate with Gino and town council to fact check the letter. We need to incorporate in
the Board of Health and the Concom pieces.
Exactly.
And I particularly would like to see the portions of those two reports that focus on the issues of the well being in the buffer zone, and the first well didn't produce what needed to be done, so they had to do fracking, and that fracking there was a delay in the water recharging, all of those little wonderful details that was in one of the reports, I think needs to be.
That's why I brought up the point about the executive summary. I'm still torn by that, because you see, all those, I think, are almost more important than the size of the buildings. Those are really get to the water quality issues in town. And you're not gonna, it's the second, George, you're not gonna get to them until you get to the section on Board of Health.
Well, I'm talking, yeah,
You know,
That's important to us as a town. I think the point is we're using their 7 points. That their eligibility criteria
I'm not
is what
questioning using them. If it was me, I would put it, I said before, you didn't agree with me, but I would put executive summary up front, say, we're rejecting it for these reasons, and then go into the detail in each of their points. But if the first place I think the water is one of the biggest issues, to Paul's point, and if the first place you get to that is wherever the Board of Health comment and the conservation, it's like page, whatever it is, 6 or something.
But just to that point, so the way the butters, I'm always looking at the butters letter just now, referring to that one. It's 1, 2, and 3, and it's 1, 2, and 3 for a certain reason. Because the eligibility requirements is 2, so it's more upfront. And that is based on the site walk what we did. They actually said that they look at those, 7 eligibility requirements. Water wasn't one of them, unless you can somehow make it massage it into a site or
The
something
reason
like
it's
that.
not one of them is because they don't do projects in Carlisle and Sherborn, and they're not used to working in Sherborn, where water quality is so important, and it affects existing abutters. They're not used to considering it.
to us. But I'm
Well,
saying
no,
Mass
but
Housing
that's
has
what we-
their.
well, I know, but-
we're dealing with a state agency, Jeff, that has their criteria, and that's what they're gonna look at. So we need to focus on that and include the water issues as well, absolutely. I just think Mass Housing lays it out, we need to tell them why, with their criteria, it
I'm
doesn't
not
work.
disagreeing with that, but I would put some sentences up front that I think the water issues are huge.
Oh,
The other
I
thing is,
agree
though-
with you 100% that they're huge. I just want to make sure that we're addressing what Mass Housing is actually going to look at.
And the other thing is, I want to say is that we don't have our data. So I don't know, I believe, is Daryl here? Because I believe they did some well pump testing, and we
It's in
tried
the
to get info from
conservation
the
letter.
state,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure if we actually got the actual GPMs and the sizing and been in
It's in
demand.
their table in your letter, right?
Go ahead.
The reason I know about this is because it was done in the buffer zone, so it was in our jurisdiction. They had to file an NOI to do the preliminary pump test. They were actually going to do the full drawdown test, the DEP test, but they decided to do it in 2 phases. So the first phase was this preliminary pump test, 8 hours. They drilled 2 wells. One of them they had to frack because it wasn't yielding. It still didn't yield very much. I don't know what the data or the Board of Health sort of reading of the data was for the second well in terms of its sufficiency to pump 20,000 gallons a day. I will say that we also, as a condition of that initial test, we had them sync 2 monitoring wells to check the hydrology of the wetlands themselves. So we have that data, but all of that stuff is, the Conservation Commission has it, and the Board of Health also has it. So if you need to look at specific data points, you can.
It's in your letter, though, too. isn't it?
Yeah, I do reference it, and the one table that has the monitoring wells for
Yeah,
the
monitoring.
wetlands is in there.
Yeah.
There's also other tables which have just the actual water levels in the wells themselves. That data is not in the wells, it's in they call them drive points, which are just
Right.
shallow surface to just measure the groundwater versus the bedrock well water itself, so.
Okay.
I mean, we can incorporate it more, I know we'll have the reference to their letters, but.
Could
if
I
you feel-
suggest as a compromise that Jeff prepare a few words and send it to the board so that when we meet on Thursday, if you have a real catchy slogan that we can fit in somewhere
I'll do
that
that.
doesn't
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
violate
I mean,
this.
I don't think
you
it
guys
needs-
are more knowledgeable with this than I am, but the Mass Housing people, we're an exception to the rule, and I understand that they're going to judge based on their rules, but this water quality issue is something that wasn't thought of when they came up with this affordable housing company, I think.
Yeah, I don't think the executive summary needs to be more than a very short paragraph saying,
Totally.
we think it fails to meet the 40B safe harbors, it doesn't meet the 7 eligibility requirements for 40B projects. And
As
as
detailed.
demonstrated in detail in much greater length.
That's exactly.
Yeah, so add a paragraph up into the front
That's
page.
what I'm
Okay.
thinking, yeah.
Yeah, and if, Mr. Bartleby, if you want to be the scrivener on this, that would be great.
But to Paul's earlier point, though, can we work backwards? Because I'm worried about time also. So we need to submit this on Friday, is that correct? So we're going to vote on it Thursday night.
Correct.
So I sort of feel like we need a sub-team of maybe two of us, because we can't have three, to work on this between now and
You want to work
Thursday.
with one of the lawyers?
Well, it definitely has to have at least one of the lawyers on it, I think, yes. I don't know whether I would be that much value added, but
But I think you're most familiar with the conservation and
I went to
Board of
both the Board of Health and the
issues, so-
conservation meetings.
I think if you could put together a
I'll do the summary,
paragraph and
yeah.
Send it to Chuck.
I'm happy to work with you on it,
Okay.
unless,
There you go. No, this is wonderful.
I'm sure Paul would do a better job, but I'm not sure he's willing to volunteer, so I'll
I
volunteer.
love volunteers, except
I just
for-
feel like we don't want to arrive Thursday night and be having the same discussion.
I agree.
And so then, so working
When
back,
he's done.
working backwards again from my project management mindset is that when would we would want KP Law to have reviewed it before Thursday night?
Oh, yes,
right?
absolutely.
So,
David, you're going to send this to them tomorrow, I assume, correct? So they already have it. But I guess
They have it
the
already, but they don't have
this red line version that we're working off tonight, and we need to incorporate in the Conservation Commission and the Board of Health comments and get that to KP Law tomorrow. And if you want to work on your paragraph with Chuck, if you could get it to David tomorrow or Wednesday at the very latest, that would be
probably
good.
not first thing.
No, by
tomorrow,
the
but
end of the day
yeah.
tomorrow. And then David can incorporate that in. KP can have a chance to review it Wednesday or Thursday morning before our meeting Thursday night.
Well, we can also email it and provide individual comments.
Yes, correct.
So maybe we should try it to have a draft wherever we are with it end of day Wednesday.
That's a good idea.
And then
That all of us can review.
we can all review it, and we won't be seeing it the first time Thursday night. And we
Exactly.
could provide comments that could maybe edit that version during the day Thursday.
Correct.
So that what we see Thursday, I'm
Maybe
trying to
we
make
also-
Thursday be as clean as it can be.
Maybe we also, I don't know if this is just, it's too many people making comments last minute, but do we want to have Neil and Daryl also review what we're putting in the letter from their perspectives?
I could reach out to them.
Okay, if you could, just maybe you could communicate with them
Yeah,
directly,
I'll
just
do
so
that.
we make.
So, on that score, the part, I found the coverage of the wells was done, I thought, very thoroughly by the Concom, and that's where I would focus for that piece of it. But the coverage of the sewer part of it, I thought was covered very well by the Board of Health. And again, it wasn't, it's not being critical of anything, but it wasn't in the wetlands. It's up on a cliff, well, it's up on the ledge, and to get there, all of the pitfalls are so nicely described in the Board of Health. So I'm trying to flag those issues for you, because if you're going to do a summary, I don't think you need to repeat.
I got the Board of Health all marked up with my yellow highlighters already,
Okay, good.
okay?
And you were
I've
there,
been
I
there and
think.
done it, and I went to both meetings. I went to,
Yes.
even Neil
So
didn't
you're-
charge me
you're
admission to
perfect.
come Thursday night, so.
But that's, I don't think you need to repeat redundantly what each one said about the same subject. I think
Yes.
if you took the Concom piece on the water and the Board of Health piece on the sewer,
Yes.
in 3 or 4 sentences, you got it.
Well, they both prepared executive summaries in their letters, too. So you could start with that, although I found things that I would probably add to their executive summaries. But Chuck and I we'll develop a paragraph
perfect.
for consideration
We'll
up
communicate
front.
with them.
And then KP, David, you'll make the rest of the edits, or cause them to be made, the revisions, merging the comments with the abutters letter and our version?
Let's have
John,
them-
I know, John, you had to add
Just
something.
one quick thing in terms of process, let's have them redlined against the clean version that we're working with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just accept all the comments on the
Yeah.
butters.
Yeah, that's what, yeah.
John, go ahead.
Yeah, just, John Garrison again, just hopefully a suggestion for Jeff or Chuck or whoever's working on this. In our letter where we attempted to address these issues of water and septic, where, I think it's on page 4, where we thought it fit was under the criteria of design, because the
Yeah.
the guidelines specifically mentioned topography, environmental concerns.
Environmental
And we
concerns.
listed each of the projects separately, but then at the bottom of that page, we start with environmental concerns specifically the second bullet there, I know, and you just all probably got this letter today.
Right, the carryover bullet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
private wastewater.
Exactly.
Right.
Going under the railroad tracks, pumping it up the hill, far
Right.
from the
Yep.
units themselves.
Right.
Yeah. So
I love
you
it, I
could-
just don't like it on page 4, is basically what I'm
No,
saying.
absolutely, but, no pride of authorship, but,
Yeah.
use that as a
Leave it on
as a
page
jumping
4,
off
but
point.
also put a paragraph
Yes.
on the front page
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
Put it on page 6 for you, too.
Yeah, that's good.
Go ahead, Neil.
I think, Jeff, as you were talking about water, I do think that's important. One place to look is actually in Carlisle, because I did a little bit of searching, and there's a project that they didn't ultimately end up stopping completely, but they got significant revisions made to it, and one of the things that they focused on, Carlisle's sort of a sister town to us in the sense that they also rely almost completely on private water, and so they made a bunch of arguments about that kind of thing, about that towns that are in this position are uniquely vulnerable on environmental and design issues, and so I think you can bring that out to the front, and I would, if you want to go and look up sort of some of the documents I saw on Carlisle and some of the case, they sort of went through this entire sort of history of this one project and then pushing back against it and getting concessions and back and forth, and so it might be valuable. I know time is short, but it'd be maybe some
It
good
could be,
points.
I'm glad you mentioned it, thank you.
All right.
So one last question, I'm assuming, but we think it makes sense to have KP here Thursday night, or no?
David?
David, will KP be here on Thursday night? Or maybe available by phone?
Yeah, for some reason, I think the new one, Barbara, that we haven't met yet,
She's the one that's 40B focused.
she's the one that would be working with us.
Can she be here Thursday night?
I know
think
she can be here by phone. I'll check again on whether
Yeah,
she's...
if she can, that would be great.
I
This
think
is
it's
Barbara
be a
St.
good
Andrew, right?
fallback.
It's important.
Yeah, I think it is.
Different Barbara.
Don't you think so?
Okay. Any other questions, comments? If
Just
not, I think we
a general
know.
comment that I wanted to thank the abutters for the work that you put in and the money that you're spending. It's much appreciated. It does help the board.
And,
Very much respected.
and I want to thank all the other boards for all the work that you've put in on this, I think, and the other departments, DPW, fire, police, that have, everybody's sort of come together to work on getting this together, so I appreciate that, because everybody's volunteering, well, most everybody, their time for the, for all these meetings that were kind of extra at this time of year when we're usually focusing on budgets, so.
And one final comment, that although we've been going back and forth with all these different edits, the letter actually reads pretty well. This is
This is so much better than what we looked at last time.
right, you can see progressively that we're really getting there. So I feel like to use a football analogy, because I've been watching too much, we've kind of moved from the 20-yard line all the way down to like the 3rd-yard line. We really have made progress.
Just don't be like the Patriots and not be able to score when you're on the 1 yard line.
If you use a football metaphor, don't say 20-yard penalty. I don't think there's such a thing.
All right, thank you. I think the only thing we have left, we're going to go into executive session, adjourn to executive session, not return to open session. I've got the language here. Item 1A, Item 1, MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, subsection 3, to discuss strategy with respect to threatened potential litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of the town, and the chair so declares. Library. You need a second and a roll call vote.
Second.
Second by Mr. Yan. Having a second, we will now have a roll call vote. Mr. Durensis?
I'm going to vote aye, but I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight. I vote aye.
Mr. Yan?
I'm going to vote aye and ask everyone to leave. Quietly.
Mr. Waldron?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I got no comment too.
Mr. Morrell, aye. Having passed by a vote of 5-0, the open session is now closed and will not be returning to open session. We're now in executive session.